Attention! Here is a really chaotic art process. It's not a tutorial to learn how to draw, but more about trusting the process. In this video, we are going to draw Shane Hollander from Heated Rivalry. This is only the second process video I share, so let me know if it was useful. Just so you know, the colors on the recording might change a bit from the final drawing, so don't be surprised. I start to draw the contour of the face because that is what I will use to place the eyes, nose, the lips. I'm trying to follow the shapes I can see on the reference. I like to place the eyes very quickly with the eyebrows. I feel like it's the easier part to start with, then you can place the nose and then the lips. You can find different shapes on the reference you use. I recommend to start with big ones, so it's easier to find your way with the little ones. If you follow me, you know I always say this, but working with shapes and empty spaces is very interesting to frame your drawing on the canvas. Every reference you use has its own dynamic, and maybe it's just me, but following the shapes instead of the lines really adds something to your drawing. Now that you have your chaotic but reliable first sketch, you can start to draw on top of your sketch layer. Sometimes when the sketch is not that messy, I like to work with the eraser to prevent losing the dynamic of the sketch, because you know when you draw your line art and you find it absolutely horrible, you start to think, should I do only sketches now? Where I draw my line art in this amount of shapes and lines, you can actually see your line art. You just have to suppress some lines, correcting the proportion, readjust an eye. With the dark background, I add my skin tone. I put the main shadows with the aerograph brush. This is a technique I've learned from Feng Zhao. You have to see her tutorials, they are amazing. I readjust and emphasize darker shadows and some light parts to sharpen the shadows. And again, same as the sketch, work with empty spaces. I will put you all the brushes I use in the description so you don't have to search for them. I like to use the graphite pen with mid opacity for this part because it is sharper and more precise, but not too opaque so you can work with texture, and here we like texture. I like to use tones that are already on the canvas. Pipette is very useful, it helps to keep a consistency with your color palette. And of course, don't forget to darken the mouth, all the parts that are more saturated, like the inside of ears, the corner of the eyes, the nostrils, the eyebrows, under the chin. You can select a soft dark red for the lips. We will render it later, but it is nice to have already a base color. I color the eyebrows now because I like to have the full face done before doing the hair, so the eyebrows give structure, because that's normally the hair's job. So now that we have the main shadows and skin tone, we want a smoother contour. Go to FX options and turn your line art in the standard red that is suggested to you by clicking on the little reload arrow. I lowered the opacity, but it doesn't change much of the process, it's just a bit smoother. Create a new layer on top of the line art. We are going to erase this sharp line art by painting on top of it with this brush that is so amazing. I named Watercolor Opaque 2. This brush has a wet effect and blends very well, sometimes too much, with the other color on the same layer. It has like its own wheel. You can't really decide of the smudging precision, but that's why I love it. So focus on the philtrum, take the line art color with the pipette, draw the arc of the philtrum softly, take the skin color of the place you want to blend and mix both. Then we get this beautiful smooth shadow that suggests the philtrum line without actually drawing it. I'm going to use this technique to blend the rest of the line art. It requires some patience and it's okay if you have to redo some parts. And the most important thing is trust the process, really. Honestly, that should be the title of this video because even I wasn't sure where I was going with this drawing. I've grown not being really a fan of blending brushes, I feel like it's too flat. In fact, after watching graphic styles animations like Arcane and Across the Spider-Verse, I tend to prefer texture over blended artworks, and now I just cannot be satisfied with my art if there isn't enough texture. I've been told that the thing that really stands out in my work is the eyes. I don't really know how I'm doing that, but I think I spend a lot of time figuring out the shape of the pupils. I don't try to be too precise, just playing with colors, not too much rendering in the pupil, but more work around the eyelids. I keep fixing shadows and lights, because honestly there is always something to fix. I'm adding shadow spots here and there, following the reference. See how I use the watercolor opaque 2 brush to blend the nose bridge by mixing line art color and nose skin color. Keep in mind that this brush only mixes with colors that are on the same layer. There is no plan, so feel free to adjust anything you see that needs to be fixed. Working on the mouth is always an experiment. I don't really have a plan, but you ask someone, every mouth I've done has been absolutely gorgeous, but my favorite of all time is still this one on my handwound fan art. I mean, look at this beauty, I want to kiss my art, is it even appropriate? But yeah, let's keep up with Shane's mouth. I feel like light is very important on lips. Don't put too much, but put enough. For these highlights, I like to mix the red of the lips with a light skin tone instead of white. You will almost never see me using black and white. I like to play with different shades to suggest black or suggest white, but never using them. I feel like it adds more realism by suggesting things and not actually drawing them. Like when you sketch, that is why I told you working in shapes is very interesting. Your brain makes you see things that are only suggested, and that might be the thing I love the most about art. So now the hair. So hair is basically movement, giving you freedom to add lighting and shadows as you want. I use 3 brushes for the hair: graphite pen, watercolor opaque 2 and rose oil. Again, you can find them in the description. I lowered the opacity of my brushes because, again, we want texture. Note the way we see hair strands of hair without drawing them one by one. I often see people drawing hair strands by strands, but this way you lose the dynamic and the movement. Working with light, shadows and different shades help to add movement, and that is what we want. Time passes by and I can see my drawing getting better by fixing lights and shadows. My work is basically about layering. Working with watercolor opaque 2 feels like oil paint when I never actually tried it. Maybe one day when I have a real art studio. When you spend a long time on a drawing, you forget essentials. That is why you should flip your canvas. You'll not escape it, I face the truth, so you'll have to. And this is the importance of flipping your canvas, mate. Really do it. I mean, he looks fine, but there is definitely something off. I have adjusted some lights and now we can render the eyes. I'm using skin tone to add light in the pupils and some white. On Ibis Paint there is this option that just saves lives. You can readjust parts that look odd and restructure your drawing instead of drawing the part again. I restructured the haircut by adding brush strokes all around. Remember, the shape is more important than the details. Well, it is time to play with options. On Ibis Paint you have different layer options. I like to add contrast with overlay. I really recommend you to play with different options. Eventually they can upgrade your style. I mean, just look how it gives his pale face some colors. And look at these lips! This part is so satisfying. If you've never used the multiply option, just hear me out. Create a new layer and go to the options. Find a multiply at the very top. Take a dark shade of dark blue. Paint over the face and lower the opacity as you feel like. You can use purple too, it works better sometimes, but not too saturated. Erase some parts to make the light pop out. The more your blue layer is opaque, the more this light effect will show. I try to add more light with the overlay option. Here is a perfect example of how I erase the line art by mixing it with the skin. You can see the way I paint to really blend the colors. I proceed the same way for ears rendering. It is all about building shapes. Look at how I first paint with big strokes and then apply the light. At this point I just use overlay and standard skin tone to fix the last shadows and the highlights of the lips. He has very young hairs. It is very soft, so I'm just using the color of the eyes with watercolor opaque 2, mixing it with skin, and I love how it turned out. Hudson Williams got this really little cute smile and I love what I did. I add some freckles with watercolor opaque 2 obviously, as well as the dimple. I tend to add too much details, so final fixings are a bit challenging for me. Time to add the last highlights, and for that create a new layer. Turn it into add layer option. With the skin tone, apply softly on the areas you want to highlight. Create a new layer and paint over with the color you got, and blend with the skin color. There is a little highlight on the lower lip, so proceed the same way. For the pupils, I blend with the skin color in order to get a light brown reflection. I keep adding lights on the edges of the face, but I have to stop quickly before making him a disco ball. I skipped the shirt part because I wanted to focus on the face. With multiply option, I add a dark red shadow under the jawline too and lower the opacity. I add more on the nostril and the mouth corners and fix lights of the face. Again. I add strokes of watercolor opaque 2 on the hair layer with this pattern and add shadow 2 with black to structure the haircut.
2 hours later.
Hope you found this video useful. I'm coming with more process videos. Thank you for watching. You can find me on my social media like Instagram and TikTok. The links are in the description. See you soon!